done on this occasion, but we all look forward to the day when we can make that a reality again. I particularly want to welcome people who are attending their first spring seminar. This is the only time when we get to meet in this way together as members to have discussions. So today is for just members and guests, including journalists and partners. And can you please note that our media colleagues will be present over the next 3 days, and we agree that it's okay to quote speakers, but only to reference them if that's been agreed. So no one will be quoted without their consent. This is being run on Zoom, and there's a number of regional sessions later this afternoon running on Teams. So in order that you get into the right room, you need to check your details, as it were, and make sure you're in there with the right link. And I want to take the opportunity to start by thanking our sponsors of the virtual spring seminar, and you'll see those in the background wallpapers, as it were, to our meetings. And we've got a number of great sessions today, and this first one is being led by our Principal Social Workers Network, and we wanted this to be the first discussion that we had this year at our spring seminar. And PSWs have, of course, over the last year played an increasingly important role in ADASS and, of course, in many areas of our work. And then after that, we have our 9 regional workshops. And I really do want to thank the regional colleagues for coming together and putting those sessions together. And we're ready to be challenged, and we look forward to this space in the next 2 or 3 days to reflect and support and to learn from each other. Do engage and do tweet #SpringSeminar21. And I'm pleased to start now by introducing Jennifer Rees and our Principal Social Work colleagues, who are going to explore some messages from the front line. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James, and hopefully the slides will come up any minute now. But I'll start by saying that it's a great pleasure and a privilege for us to be representing the Principal Social Worker Network here at your ADASS Spring Seminar, and you know, no pressure being the first seminar to kick off proceedings. As James said, I'm Jennifer Rees, and I'm Principal Social Worker for London Borough of Islington, and also the chair of the National Principal Social Worker Network. Simon Holmes is also the co-chair of the National Principal Social Worker Network and played an integral part in putting this presentation together today, but unfortunately can't actually be with us. So I'm joined by some regional chair colleagues, principal social workers who are also chairs of regional principal social worker networks, Quimo from Barnsley, Melanie Pearce from Oxfordshire, Tracy Davis from West Sussex, Marie Lynch from Halton, and Liana Kotzer from London. So we've tried to have a mix so that we're actually representing a good cross-section of the country as well. So we really wanted to acknowledge and thank social work staff who have worked tirelessly, creatively, and with passion during the coronavirus pandemic, having measurable impact on improving people's lives, working with children and with adults, always ensuring that people are safe, protected, and have the support they require to live a fulfilling life. In terms of the impact of social work, often not enough is made of the positive relationships and outcomes that social workers are part of every day. And this in itself is a key message to give as we look back over the last year and also make choices about social work and social care in the years ahead. Next slide, thank you. As we all know, the pandemic has shone a light on intolerable conditions, deprivations and inequalities that existed long before COVID, and social workers knew these existed. Now everyone else does too. And so again, this is an important moment for change. Social workers champion the needs of the people they work with and are fierce advocates for social justice and inclusion. And during the pandemic, we've encountered examples of where the intervention of a social worker has literally helped to save lives. and also made a person's day, purely by offering that all-important human contact. And so behind the social workers as well stand incredibly committed principal social workers, and the impact of principal social workers really has been pivotal and wide-ranging over the last 12 months, but also prior to that as well. But in particular over the last 12 months, making sure that staff are supported and that well-being is given the rightful emphasis that it really does require. Interpreting and implementing the many different pieces of guidance around the Coronavirus Act and easements and many other aspects of practice, promoting the ethical framework widely, both within social care, but also with partners too. Reaching out and making a system-wide difference, making sure that people within our communities are supported. For example, people who are having to shield, people who might be experiencing increased domestic violence, and also people who need support to be coming out of hospital safely as well. But let's not forget all of that business as usual that has to carry on, making sure that newly qualified social workers are fully supported and really get a good first year as a beginning to their social work career, making sure that students who are our future in the workforce get the good quality placements they need, making sure that services continue to be quality assured, continuing to provide learning and development opportunities, practice guidance, and also contributing to the recruitment, which we know is so important in our workforce now and going forward. So I'm going to hand over to colleagues who will deliver examples and messages from their own networks, but just to sort of really emphasize that much of what colleagues are going to talk about now are happening in all of the different regions across the country as well. It's just that obviously we only had an hour and not 3 or 4 days to do this. So I'm going to hand over to Kwai first and foremost to talk about what's been going on in his region.
So thanks everybody thanks for inviting me to this seminar. I guess just to start off from I'm a principal social worker in Barnsley, and I currently chair the Yorkshire and Humber group. And from my perspective, it's a privilege to represent my other 14 colleagues and authorities, and being trusted to do so as well. Hopefully I'm representing in that light. I was asked to look at the issues around mental health, COVID and partnerships. However, within a few minutes, I don't think I'm going to cover everything, but I want to give a brief overview of what sort of practices have been going on in our region to try and highlight the good practice we've been doing. And I guess, mental health starts from home. And one of the biggest issues we had was how do we support each other? All the PSW, we supported each other mentally, emotionally, and people weren't afraid to pick the phone up and speak to each other as well. I think that was the crucial bit, not just on Teams. Let's pick up the phone, not just on Zoom. Let's do it directly, voice to voice. Partially because we also had some new members who joined the group, and some of them were first timers in the PSW role as well. So it's about encouraging them, enabling them to do their roles positively within the councils. What did we do differently? I think right in the beginning of the pandemic, we increased our meetings from what was 3 monthly to fortnightly catch-ups. Yes, there were shorter times, but within that, every fortnight meeting, we took in a lot of subjects. We discussed many, many things. Some I will continue to touch upon during this presentation. Peer support for each other was a crucial thing. Sharing good practice, innovations across the board. For example, how do we conjure up legal briefings to make life easier for our staff to work with? Looking at the easements, what sort of messages are we putting across to staff? Sharing risk assessment tools, for example, how do we open day services safely during the second period of lockdown? I'll touch up on some emergent themes in the next couple of slides. Partnership working across the system. For each of our meetings every 2 weeks, we had the lead from our region, from Social Work England, Skills for Care, and BASS was Business Social and Social Workers, who attended regularly on that basis. What that gave us was being awareness of the regional initiatives, and are still running alongside the business as usual. Sharing some collective views on how do we support staff across the region to promote better mental health for our staff, and how that then translates to the work that they carry through to deliver to our residents and our colleagues as well. So we also did, during our meetings, we co-opted national leads. An example of that would be, we actually invited national guest speakers. We had national Share Lives Plus speakers to highlight the need for continued Share Lives carers recruitment, advising us how in processes, the speedy processes to avoid some of the long, sort of drawn out processes that we need when we're having to attend to such a sort of significant period of time during our lockdowns. So that's the first one. Next one, please. Okay, some of the things that we did well, I would say definitely professional support. How do we support our own staff and external colleagues? By that I mean social workers and other organisations. We certainly have social work trained staff who are based in secondary mental health trusts. We needed to ensure that they were supported too, not just those who are employed by the local authority. Strengthening partnerships, as I mentioned earlier, but however, we were looking at the forward thinking as well for the year 2020-21 ahead of time as well. Looking at the approved mental health professionals, approved mental capacity practitioners standards. I think we were one of the regions who actually held a collective discussion on this with Social Work England, trying to sort of share the knowledge and skills amongst the group. Legal and ethical briefings. We discussed Care Act easements and risk assessment recently. Another one of those examples is looking at how did we implement visits to care homes in the early days and supported living environments when we were facing challenges from quite rightly, loved ones who all wanted to visit their family and friends within the care setting. So we have to devise some kind of advice that we can then pass back to our colleagues. Hidden harms, a very sort of real situation in the early days of lockdown, where we uncovered through the emergency food deliveries, we found there were self-neglect cases that had been brought to light, and the group actually gained a lot of insight how we approach these cases and these situations, so we share good practices within that. Overall, the PSW work streams, such as discharge to assess, we're also sharing regional tools, our national tools, on how do we actually making sure that whilst we support our colleagues within the acute trust settings to make sure that people are moved through the system in an appropriate manner, but they're legally compliant and also respecting human rights. So we want to make sure that in sharing these practices, respecting people's human rights, that they're not staying in hospital longer than necessary, but yet the proper processes are being followed and due process adhered to as well. Next, please. Thank you. I talked about the emergent themes that we kind of identified for the year ahead, this year and probably next year as well, pending the roadmap. We talked about what does that mean for us as a group of PSW in promoting people's human rights, upholding them. We've known since the roadmaps opened up more that 2 visitors are now allowed now. Care home visit, the deprivation liberty safeguards, and actually translating to then moving forward the liberty protection safeguards preparedness. Are we prepared as a group of PSWs? Are we prepared as council, working with our colleagues in health as well? Discharge to assess, the approved mental health work, engagement working, remote working, different styles, and also identifying those who may be missed as well, I think, upholding human rights in that sense. So there will be people who have not been able to come together, and we don't want to miss those out. Strength-based, in unearthing some of those hidden harms, we would also identify some families and individuals, how have they coped and managed during this period of time, the last 12 months. Actually, there was great community resilience in there, and we want to build on that going forward. How do we ensure those positives are not then thrown back into the pool? And staff development, as Jennifer alluded to earlier, ensuring staff health and well-being are maintained, supporting our students, ASYEs, with face-to-face contact, actually bringing them in, so then they are supported by their supervisors, their mentors so that they're not left to make decisions on their own. We talked about examining risks and benefits of technology. Here we are, we're in a conference that's first time on a virtual basis, and it actually brought some benefits. For example, some younger people, I've certainly speak to my colleagues in the CAM services, they actually use as a positive for them. Many didn't want to turn up for appointments. However, through the use of technology, digital technology, people with some with learning disabilities, those people with autism, actually using this kind of format for communication is absolutely the most beneficial use for them. And however, some other groups are less confident and engaged, and we have to make sure that them too are not missed. And one of the examples of greater partnership working when using different technology is we've actually found that more partners were able to engage in multi-agency safeguarding meetings and forums, where previously physical attendance may have been low because they were traveling between different bases, couldn't find the parking space, or for whatever reason. So those were sort of all the positives. Going forward, we want to maintain momentum, using the intelligence gathered during the early doors of food deliveries and emergency parcels, learn from the risk assessment and the essential contacts that we have established with our residents, with our colleagues, support each other. A big one here about social justice, inequality, access to space, housing, humanistic needs, the big society approach. Social care in sort of promotion of mental health requires all of these to join up properly in order to move forward. Okay, thanks, Ed. Next one. So a couple of things then, in terms of finishing my bit of this, the improvements, although we've looked at some of the really positive things we've done, going forward, what other things do we need to look at? Improved integrated networking. At the moment, we still have separate principal social workers and principal occupational therapist groups. So we need to sort of engender that bit more close-knit professionalism between us. Cross-regional working, share practices. Whatever we do locally within one region, we should be sharing that nationally. Principal social worker projects, certainly within Yorkshire and Humber, we're looking at some of the emerging issues for us to focus a year ahead and share with other colleagues. For example, one thing we're looking at, how are PSWs themselves supervised? Do they receive professional supervision or otherwise? So we want to share this, have discussion with Chief Social Workers Office and other partners who are employing social workers as well. And the last point for me, I guess, is one of the things we don't do too well, I think, which we are promoting a lot more, is sharing with our children's PSW network colleagues as well. So across the regions, we've started those links, started those regular meetings. So we will be inviting each other to our respective meetings on a regular basis. So I think there are things, emerging themes that we are doing really well, the things we need to improve on, and rather than others being repeated. So I'm going to hand over now, this is the end of my presentation, hand over now to Tracy Davis and Melanie Pierce. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwight. Thank you for that. So I'm Melanie Pierce. I'm the PSW for Oxfordshire for adults and also the chair of the South East region. Tracy?
And I'm Tracy Davis. I'm the principal social worker from West Sussex County Council and vice chair of our South East region.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. So thank you for the opportunity, for giving us the opportunity to share with you some of the challenges and dilemmas that were posed that we needed to consider as part of the announcement of lockdown. So just wanted to share some of these with you. So these were the initial thoughts as PSWs about what we needed to kind of get to grips with and to think about in a different way. So obviously the induction of new social workers. So we needed to consider our overall recruitment and induction of new workers across local authorities, and including our mental health partnerships, social workers that join them too. We were also lucky to have kind of lots of new starters through the Return to Social Work scheme, which was excellent, as well as our ongoing recruitment. And it's really important for us to consider kind of what the induction programs might look like. So initially, those are the thoughts and things that we were trying to share between us about what we could do and how we could do it better. So we've talked a little bit about the assessed and supported year of employment, but we wanted to ensure that the required reviews and the moderations of the programme were maintained throughout this period, and that obviously including both the internal moderation and the regional work as well that goes on and is business as usual. So we needed to make sure that continued, and obviously the need we felt would potentially be greater than usual, and it was really important for us to maintain the excellent levels of support we could provide to those newly qualified workers. We needed to continue to have positive relationships with our higher education institutions, and there's many strong teaching partnership networks across the regions and academies, and we needed to make sure that these were maintained. But we also needed to have conversations about any gaps that there may be, or significant issues in relation to courses that would be going online for students, and whether some of the impact may be around that. So it's another big area for us to kind of work in partnership with. Overall student placements. So we had that consideration of how we're going to do this. Are we still going to be able to provide placements throughout lockdown? And initially, there were concerns about this. And if we could, would we be able to provide good learning experiences for them and shadowing opportunities that they need, so desperately need. So this includes the AMPs, so those people that were on the AMP training, but also the cohorts of our apprentices that we've been working hard over the last few years to promote and develop. The broader support for the students. So, we had to consider, becoming a student in a new team. So that virtual team, how will they feel part of that team, and how could we provide the learning from colleagues? And as we all know, that rich experience around sitting alongside and working together with experienced practitioners, brings a huge enriched learning experience. And those are the sorts of things that we were concerned we needed to think about. And the access to sort of peer support, but also access to informal support was something that needed to be high on our radar. CPD training for staff. So how would we provide this? So again, we had to think about what we were going to do differently. How could we facilitate these opportunities for all our staff for continuous professional development? And in the fact that all the face-to-face learning, of course, and training was suspended. So again, we needed to think differently about this too. Generally, we wanted to think, and we need to think about how to ensure our staff are working well and well at work, so both those, and were able to do their jobs well. And we needed to provide sort of practical and emotional support to staff members who were shielding, and kind of reassurance too to our workforce overall, who were being required to continue with face-to-face visits. So it's a key areas that we needed to think about and provide support for. We needed to ensure that people had the equipment. We've talked about digital technology. Did our members of staff literally in our workforce have the correct kit, and could they work agilely? Was that possible? And we also needed, from our own assurance perspective, to be ensured that people were still receiving supervision opportunities and reflective conversations. And it was important for us to consider and discuss. We spent lots of time talking about work-life balance and the challenges around people working from home, so our staff working from home. And obviously some people live alone. We wanted to make sure that people didn't become isolated, and also people, we've heard stories of makeshift offices, so things like people using ironing boards, etc., as desks. So it's making sure, again, people had the right access to equipment and things that they needed. It's really important also to acknowledge that due to the nature of our work, that it meant that staff were having difficult conversations. So lots of examples were shared across our region, and I've heard nationally around difficult conversations with potential perpetrators in people's kitchens, but also thinking about other general difficult conversations when you're alone. So it's how are people going to access that immediate kind of debrief and support, which was key to this. We really needed to listen to our staff, and as the slide shows, these are some of the key highlights, just a few of the areas that people were concerned about. And there's examples there that I've alluded to, but one of the ones specifically is around the concern that people had about not being anywhere in person, and it's hard to know building relationships over Teams and over WhatsApp, which are the kind of the digital technologies we were using. And would they really be able to pick up that other information about environmental issues and concerns, and or build that rapport? So those were certainly some of the areas that our workforce were talking to us about and raising concerns. So I'll hand you over to Tracy.
Thanks, Mel. So if we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. This slide just basically gives you a little bit of a flavour, and it is just that. It is a little bit of a flavour of what most PSWs were involved in across our region with our staff and with the wider sort of organisations we work within. So we moved everything online, and that happened sort of very, very suddenly, and it was a massive sort of learning curve for many of our parts of our organisation, from learning and development teams to our frontline teams and to the teams that our principal social worker network sort of work within. Many of us as local authorities introduced Microsoft Teams. That probably happened varyingly and in a phased sort of way over the period. But that was an enormous help and really helped us to support our new worker induction programmes, our continuous professional development, training opportunities, assessed and supported year in employment delivery with the panel and moderation events taking place virtually. It also enabled frontline staff to actually carry out direct observations of practice, provide that informal and formal support through supervision, coaching, informal meetups, etc. So it can't be underestimated. You know, if the pandemic had happened at another time, 10 years ago, I'm not quite sure, you know, how we would have managed without the technology in place. We used this as an opportunity to develop new things, new ways of supporting each other, such as monthly wellbeing groups, action learning sets or group supervisions were set up, and most teams had daily sort of team check-ins initially, and then reducing over time as people felt more confident and comfortable through the in terms of different ways of supporting each other. There were other innovative ways of supporting teams. It became quite apparent sort of early on that, or through the first sort of lockdown period, that actually people were beginning to sort of internalise some of the experiencings they were having out in the field, such as hospital social work teams working relentlessly in hospital settings or attached to hospital settings and having conversations with bereaved relatives, etc. So we developed ways of supporting our teams in relation to sort of debriefings and reflective sessions, so that they could really discuss their experiences and share their experiences with others. Mel's already explained that we worked really hard as a PSW group and our wider sort of teams to maintain the really close links that we have with our universities in relation to either teaching partnerships, or where there's no teaching partnerships formally set up, then our other partnership arrangements. And that really enabled us to work with our universities to enable the continuation of the delivery of CPD modules for our workforce, and the continuation of assessed and supported year in employment, and of course the continuation of our student placements. It's absolutely vital that we continued with the student placements through the pandemic. There were early discussions about whether we paused placements or how we could support them to continue. But we knew that if we didn't support the student placements to continue, that come this year's sort of round of recruitment, that we'd be in a very different place. Our pipeline of newly qualified social workers is absolutely critical to our sustainable sort of workforce and recruitment planning. So we worked really closely with our HEIs to enable this. and to support the continuation of the particularly final year students in their final 100-day placements last year. We also looked at ensured oversight of by PSWs at a local and regional level, and that was largely around sharing our approaches, you know, thinking about the different sorts of guidance documents we were developing in our own organisations, and making sure that we tried to minimise duplication as far as possible. So sharing practice guidance that we developed around remote and virtual working, around the easements, to ensure that we were applying the easements, or not invoking them, but applying the process around easements in a consistent way. Thinking about how we were using and implementing and using as a basis for other pieces of work the ethical framework that was published by the DHSC as well. And many of us have used the ethical framework to inform our quality, the development or more further development of our quality assurance frameworks and audit tools, for example. And last but not least, on this slide, that we needed to make sure that our staff were able to continue with their professional development through the pandemic, because we knew that, having moved over to our new regulator, our dedicated regulator, Social Work England, that we're on an annual re-registration cycle. So we needed to support them to be able to meet the requirements of our regulator in relation to their continuous professional development. I think all of our social work staff would have been able to maintain their continuous professional development. Personally, I think the whole last year has been one sort of continuous cycle of professional development. We've all learnt a massive amount in the last 12 months and more. So that's pretty much in a nutshell what we did. It is by no means all of what we did, but it does give you a bit of a flavour. And so I shall hand back to Mel at this point. Thanks.
Thanks, Tracy. So the next part is...
Mel, you're on mute.
Sorry, scribble error. So we needed to consider the benefits. So we needed to think about what's been working well, and actually what we needed to continue. So what we'd learned through this year, and some of those areas were greater accessibility. So we found in some areas that the access via line management and support via Teams, Skype, meant that people were able to have those very quick conversations that they needed to have with their managers. So in some cases that really worked very well, and again, so we need to continue that and have a kind of a blended approach moving forward. So there's an overall increase actually in CPD in many areas too, and training, because we could set up bespoke peer sessions, and also as a consequence there's an increase in attendance from partners too. So some of the work, and obviously Kwai was talking earlier about being safeguarding strategy meetings, so people being more available and able to sort of dip in and be available for those essential meetings. So people have really found that has been one of the very positive things of kind of the progression through this year. So new innovations like the action learner set, so obviously we've had to think differently, which we have, and the wellbeing groups have all made a very positive impact, and the workforce are sharing that with us. So those are the sorts of things that we need to hang on to, and we need to continue to develop and move and have moving forward. More focused and productive conversations about learning generally through webinars. There's lots of online, because everything was put online, so we were online courses, webinars, and also the ability to record training so that people when they have time can log in and view the training themselves. Because things were also on Teams and Zoom, they were more bite-sized, so actually people felt that they were more engaging and more direct, more succinct, so that actually they were much more accessible for staff generally to weave in within their calendars, within their working week. So again, positive things that we need to take forward. We've continued, obviously, and we'll need to continue to support our recruitment and the planning for the future. And actually, you know, we have interviewed people on Teams, and there has been some success with that. We've had virtual open days and other opportunities for people to talk to. So, for example, I've met with student social workers. Again, it was easier to do because we didn't have to travel around the HEIs and the universities. So actually, we did it all in one go. So those sorts of things have been really useful and for us to consider to take on moving forward. Interestingly, some regions have experienced less sickness, so less absence. Generally, but I think we need to be mindful about that, because actually often some staff, or it's predicted that some staff, because they're not commuting and they're not going into offices, they've continued to work because actually they haven't been able to do the face-to-face work. So again, we just need to be, I think, more mindful of that and think about the impact of that on our overall workforce and well-being in the future. So, I mean, it goes without saying that there's clearly efficiencies. There have been efficiencies, reduced expenditure with venue hire, etc., and also travel. Which is obviously good for the environment. So there are many things that we need to you know, take advantage of, that we've had the experience of this over the last year, and build on those things for the future for our workforce. Thank you very much. That's the end of ours. I'm going to transfer over to Marie, if I may.
Thank you, Melanie and Tracy. My name is Marie Lynch. I am a principal social worker for Halton Borough Council, but I chair, along with my colleague Sheila Woods, the Northwest Principal Social Worker Network. So I want to focus a little bit on the importance of principal social workers being able to work together strategically, and how that supports and enhances the principal social work role, which enables us to very much support our frontline staff. And so I suppose I wanted to just hit it off with the kind of well-known phrase, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, from Aristotle, and to kind of demonstrate, I think, the importance of that for us as a wider, both national and regional network. And really just emphasising the importance of the strategic offer through our chief social workers from a national level, and then also our regional networks. And having been a principal social worker for some time, going back about 4 or 5 years ago, when I first started in the role, although we had Lynn as chief social worker, which was great and given us direction, it was probably just a small handful of us, for our own volition, kind of meeting up as and where we could, just every now and then locally, and probably those of us who kind of just known ourselves through teaching partnerships and what have you, to what has now grown and evolved into an incredibly supportive infrastructure. And you know, the year gone, you know, in terms of, I think, the role we have, I think, you know, I could probably speak for us all, kind of not only from my own regional but up and down the country, saying that the importance really of having that network to call upon as principal social workers. So certainly I'd want to give a nod to things like the chief social workers running the question and answer sessions, and they were very flexible. So they were increased to kind of fortnightly as we needed them, and then kind of you know, reduced as and when. So they were able to keep us really very well informed and stay as upstream as you possibly could with what was happening from central government, because, as people will be aware, we were getting constantly different changing kind of guidance and briefings and so on, and with the best will in the world, trying to keep abreast of every single email, but it was a way to kind of check in and keep abreast of everything that was going on. Really, really helpful. And likewise, the evolving offer to be able to work on some bring regional and national topics together, and the offer of being able to work on some working groups, both nationally as well as regionally, and that being an opportunity to kind of influence and raise the voice of social work and the issues around social work back into those government agendas, and certainly things like, which has been referenced, but the ethical framework, and being able to have the ethical framework to draw upon and call upon, particularly working with our health colleagues throughout the pandemic, incredibly useful, as well as the Care Act easements. So Skills for Care also offer us really helpful briefings and updates. They also run and operate the Principal Social Worker Leadership Development Programme, which is also on offer now to our Principal Occupational Therapy colleagues as well. So it kind of runs together now, which is, I think, really, really helpful. And of course, the up and coming Springboard Programme as well on offer. What has been, I think, important, people have referenced it, but being able to kind of work digitally throughout this. So one of, I think, the maybe the learning from the last year is how thinking about things and working in very different ways, like this platform, but also, you know, certainly attending some of the national meetings would have been living in the Northwest would have certainly been a whole day out of my time, where actually we were able to increase, as I said, those meetings to fortnightly and attend those meetings, and it'd be like an hour and a half of your time. And what we did find, on a very positive note, was it tended to get very, very full attendance. I think I'm probably right in saying I think the first one, the Chief Social Workers held, was about 300 people on the meeting. So you know, it's kind of a different way to think about things, but it increase inclusion and involvement. Thank you. So just touching on us as a Northwest network, and I was asked to talk a little bit about what we're proud of. One of the things I'd say, speaking on behalf of the Northwest, I think we really, really value, talking about where we started off as that small handful of principal social workers meeting, to now being a network that's supported and really, really fully representative across the Northwest. And I think that's, I have to give credit that we are actually very, very well supported regionally by ADASS and some programme officers who really help us. And we also have a lead DASS that we can work with and works into us, which also we very much appreciate. Just recently, we've had the offer that all our principal social workers to shortly be formal members of our ADASS branch governance forum, which we will most welcome. And we already have and currently have our principal social workers having representation on a number of ADASS programme boards, including our sector-led improvement and workforce boards, which again helps us promote frontline and the voice of social work and the issues for social work. You know, from, as I say, being a very small number of us to now having really good proper representation across all 23 authorities in what's a very large Northwest region, and very, very well attended forums. We have, I think I'm right in saying, very lively forums, which we also increased, as well as the chief social workers. We increased those forums to fortnightly, and we felt we benefited from the support from each other throughout and during the pandemic. And we did get really informative presentations from the chief social workers coming and giving us updates. Social Work England, BASWA, NICE, Skills for Care, RIPFA, and others. So just to touch on some of the collaborative work we've been able to do as a Northwest region. So we've just held, just back in March last month, despite the COVID, we felt it was really important to go ahead with our 2021 Northwest Principal Social Worker and Safeguarding second annual conference, which was coming together with our safeguarding network. Particularly important because I think we found an increase in safeguarding throughout the pandemic, particularly as we came out of lockdowns, were situations that through, you know, in people's home and living situations that intensified, and people had found situations stressful that had triggered very, you know, difficult and complex situations. We had a number of really great guest speakers on the day. In the morning, we focused on transitional and complex safeguarding, which I know work is going on that we're expecting from the chief social workers. But we were looking at doing work around that regionally and the implications for us as a region. And then we focused the afternoon on working digitally, which included a presentation from Mark Nicholas, Chief Social Worker NHS Digital, who's, you know, took us through the launch of the digital capabilities for social workers, as well as other subject matters, and presentation from Dr. Peter Buzzy, who's wrote a number of books and texts on social work and digital working, and who touched on really the difficulties at the moment. In terms of the home working, it may offer some benefits, as we know, but also what it does create is a blurring of those boundaries between working and people's home lives that Melanie touched a little bit on earlier as well, and some of the difficulties and the importance of supporting ourselves and our staff to look after themselves within that home working, because you get less of a demarcation from when you start work and when you finish work. What was typically happening is people ended up working, actually, ironically, much longer days whilst working from home. So kind of, you know, being very watchful of that for our workforce. We're very proud of the fact that I think as a network, obviously we've been in a position when we've worked on things within our localities, we can share things with other people like progression policies and induction policies and so on. Of course we can, but actually on one particular area we found that a number of us were working on quality frameworks, quality standard frameworks for social workers, and we actually felt it would actually be beneficial to come together and work as a group and try and produce something that maybe we could put forward and use as a region. We've just got our early draft of a social work quality assurance practice standards for social workers with a benchmarking toolkit that we hope to share with our ADASS branch, get endorsed across the Northwest region, and actually put forward as a national piece of good practice work. We're also doing some work on complex safeguarding as a framework, and tying that in with what's happening with the chief social workers and the work they're going to be launching. So it's worth saying, as a Northwest, we are a really large region, and we have a number of regions, you know, so we're made up of Greater Manchester, Cheshire, Merseyside, Lancs, Cumbria, and within that we have, you know, within all of those regions, they're all doing excellent pieces of work, but we're now in a position where people can go back and share some of those pieces of work, and we can all, you know, avoid that kind of duplication, which you know is pretty good. So we are now, I think, you know, as a force, as a voice for social work, in a position where ADASS can come to us as a network and ask us to support them with pieces of work. So we're just currently, just at our last meeting, being asked, could we support a regional response to the integration and innovation white paper, which we would welcome and want to do. So just kind of finishing on that note of kind of Aristotle and that kind of quote, it's that importance of, you know, acknowledging the evolvement and the growth of the network, but the importance of that support of the network, not only to support us as principal social workers, as individual social workers in our individual local authorities, that enables us to support our frontline staff, but to support new principal social workers who've found that stepping into this type of infrastructure incredibly helpful, and that's been the feedback, but also that support from the national and that national offer from the chief social workers to us as regions. Thank you. So I will hand over to my colleague Liana Kotzer.
Hello, I seem to be having a bit of a problem with my video. Ed, I'm just wondering if you can have a look at that. Ah, here we go. Marvelous, that should set us off. No, sorry, doesn't seem that people can see me. I'm trying to restart it, but that's not working. Anyhow, you'll have to rely on my voice if that's okay. So I'm Liana Kotze, and I'm very proud to present London as a region. We have 33 boroughs there, so it's a large meeting. Obviously, some PSWs represent more than one borough, but we are a very strong region. And I don't want to repeat all the marvelous things that my other colleagues have said across the region. But in London, I guess the thing I wanted to mention was I think the spirit of community work really shone through within the PSW network, and also social workers that we represent and the social care workforce that we represent. So that was something really special, I think, in this pandemic that we can draw on going forward. I think it was much a situation of keep calm and collaborate, as every citizen, every social worker in the community worked together really well. So as a region, just to kind of mention some of the things that we worked on is, like Mari, I think, was saying, we did a lot of work on virtual social work, and we worked with the Social Care Institute of Excellence, where we created some guides about matching people with interventions. We developed an audit tool where we looked at safeguarding mental capacity, a whole range of different things during the pandemic. And of course, we started to include questions there about bias and any anti-discrimination that we could see in casework, or indeed if we saw any elements of discrimination. That is something that featured in our auditing tool as we responded to Black Lives Matter, and the opportunity really that we had to talk about race much more openly, which I think was really welcomed by everybody. I think also us as a network, the encouraging thing is that I think throughout this year, a number of new PSWs joined us. So as a network, I think they were more diverse ethnic groups represented in our PSW network, which is really good to see. We also set up a buddying system, so people are working closely with other PSWs, especially where there's new PSWs that are perhaps not so au fait with their role, and as they're kind of shaping and learning more about their leadership, that is something that we do to support each other. I think, like Wai was saying, there was a lot of picking up of telephones, there was a lot of conversations with each other. We worked through setting up apprenticeship schemes in London, and there was a tendering process across the region as well to support new social workers into the scheme. But what I wanted to mention today is just the theme really of how we as social workers fit within the community, and where we were strategically placed across our boroughs in London to support the community. And if I can take a quote there, like Mari with Aristotle, the quote of my borough is "Fellowship is life," and that comes from a poem, of course, by William Morris. And I think that is what we realized, is that people really need fellowship with each other, and that is life. And I think much of this year was survival, where few people managed to see each other, but we still remained in contact with each other, and we still had really important conversations. So I think in most boroughs, what we celebrated was that almost all local authorities set up COVID hubs or community hubs where they were able to deliver services from. And of course, we linked social workers regionally linked with all of those activities in boroughs and supported people through that. We saw a lot of third sector charities and community groups working together with local authorities. And there was something really special about sharing the environment, managing outbreaks in care homes, and then kind of how people were, supported in relation to that. Local authorities arranging PPEs, and social workers trying to support and manage where people were able to undertake assessments and visitation where that was allowed. So the good thing about COVID is that we don't really have to explain to people anything to do with well-being. I think people kind of got that this year. And I just wanted to mention that, the thing about adult social care in particular is not just about care and support. I know we focus a lot about that. The Care Act, of course, is written about that and well-being, but there's such a social element to what we do. And that's really important, that we support social workers to identify, manage risks and needs. Because this year, I think we realized how many carers, hidden carers they were really, and how people needed the support from family and friends, and perhaps because of distance, they couldn't always visit. So social workers, I think, played a really important part in matching up those individuals, sometimes with paid or unpaid carers, and people in the community that could really kind of support them. And I think that's why, obviously, the key theme of the International Social Work Federation was around Ubuntu. And that is very much about I am because we are, and therefore my well-being affects your well-being. And I think social workers really supported each other in this way. Sorry, yeah, next slide. So I'm not going to go through all of that, but just to say that social workers dealt with loneliness, anxiety, the impact of bereavement. And I think PSWs led and supported their social workers through networks of support as we had to deal with that in our society. As Mari mentioned, many of the work that we did was digitally enabled. We had to work with a lot of safeguarding, and I think building that resources in the community is important for us to spend relationships and time with people in the community and to work with people in the third sector. Yep, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the final slide, please?
There we go. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Liana. So I hope that you've really enjoyed listening to all of that rich information. It always blows me away when I hear of all of this fantastic work going on, and reminds me why I'm so proud to be a principal social worker. And obviously principal social workers are having a hugely wide reach within their roles. And as a network, we are really committed to continuing with that leadership. There's been a lot of comment within the chat box around strategic influence and strategic input, clinical leadership, and absolutely that's where we as a network really want to position ourselves and focus ourselves. And we want to be part of the social care reform. We want to be part of really making sure that we recover into a much better normal than perhaps we had before. And I'm not going to go through all of these things that I have on this particular slide, but this gives you a flavour of how we really want to do that. And very much so we want to involve people with lived experiences as well, and also not to forget that all of us have lived experiences too, and drawing to the last bullet point on my slide, just making sure that we can actually make our network as diverse as we possibly can, and we'll be doing a lot of work on that as we go forward as well. So I'd just like to invite to say thank you very much for listening. Thank you to all of the contributors, and invite Steve and Chandler to perhaps make some comments if you would like.
Good afternoon. I can't see if you can see me. Can you see me? You can. Good afternoon, and what a fantastic start to conference. The impact, the power, the influence that you've shown in your various presentations has been amazing, amazing. I think you just have to look at the comments in the chat to see just how impressive not only your individual presentations were, but also how important social work is in organising, delivering, supporting and managing the support that we're all involved in. I'm so impressed by what you've done, and by being impressed by what you've done, I'm really excited about the role that social work can play as we clearly again enter a year where reform is going to be one of the major conversations and decisions for us going forward. I think James put in the chat just a few minutes ago how important it is not just to share with us the fantastic work that you've been doing and the impact you've had on people's lives, but to really get out there now and shout with pride about the impact that you've all had, we've all had. So I just echo some of the comments that we've had in the chat and going through. A really big thank you to all our social workers, but particularly to our principal social workers, and to you for both the leadership that you've provided to the workforce as we've gone through the last year, the support that you've provided to directors and to councils. I know, I'm extra proud in a way because Oxfordshire's PSW is in the space with you, and I seek her wise counsel on both a reactionary basis. So I had this email, what do you think? But also on a plan basis, and for all my director colleagues out there who perhaps haven't yet made that part of their routine monthly series of meetings, make sure you get your principal social worker in there to keep if not just keep you on the straight and ensure that you're supporting your workforce. So I'll just finish this part by saying again a really big thank you. You should be really proud of the work that you've done, the influence you've had, and the importance of the work that you do for each and every one of us. So a really big thank you on behalf of myself, on behalf of ADASS, on behalf of every director up and down the country. Thank you.